Hi, this is John Burroughs again. I'm going to continue with my autobiography, 7 Years to Life, and this is chapter 63, and it's called "The Door Was Always Open." It was my second day of employment at Pacific Bell, and that meant it was my first day of pole climbing, ladders, and installation school. I had fought some of the toughest guys in the area, hung out in the ghetto in the dead of night, and consumed some of the most dangerous amounts of alcohol and mood-altering drugs that the generation had to offer. I looked forward to doing those things as often as free times would allow, and I had never felt afraid of the negative possibilities that my behavior or drug and alcohol consumption presented. On this particular day, while driving to the training, I began to feel apprehensive. The apprehension was turned into an almost uncontrollable fear of moving forward with my career. The feelings were further exasperated by colliding with an auto parts pickup truck just prior to parking outside the training center. Russ had said to me on my last day of work at 42nd Avenue Shell, "You know, Paul, there will always be a place here for you." That offer had echoed in my subconscious right after my collision with the parts truck, and it was one I often thought about during my early days at Pacific Bell. I parallel parked my old 1964 Plymouth Belvedere against the curb, very close to the entrance to the training center. As was always my habit, I arrived approximately 20 minutes early, and I spent 15 minutes of that time arguing with myself about the pros and cons of continuing forward. I knew the door would always be open to me at 42nd Avenue Shell as long as Russ or Dick owned it, and the comfort that offer provided me and gave me the strength to see if I could be successful in my new opportunity. I reluctantly walked through the gates and reported to the person that my papers told me to ask for. There was a brief orientation and description of the skills we were sent there to acquire. There were only 3 skills that needed to be mastered during the specific time periods for each skill before my employment at Pacific Bell was official. The skills were pole climbing, ladder training, and installation/repair training. It was mandatory that we met the minimum efficiency level for each skill. Pole climbing was pretty much what the term denoted. We had to learn how to climb both stepped and non-stepped poles and maneuver safely around the pole according to Bell system practices. This skill required some equipment. It required a climbing belt that once you reached your desired position on the pole, it was the means to keep you safely secured in your position. The belt was in addition to your tool belt. You were also issued gaffs or spikes that were strapped to your legs and used to penetrate the pole, providing a solid foothold on non-step poles. They were not necessary for step poles. The steps on the step pole were positioned too high on the pole for anyone to reach. This was designed to discourage irresponsible children and adults the temptation to try and climb one. As an employee, you were issued metal steps that attached to customized holders that were affixed to the pole. Finally, before you were allowed to even climb a pole, you had to wear a hard hat, long-sleeve shirt, and test the pole to make sure it was safe to climb. The Bell system practices gave you detailed instructions on how to test a pole for unsafe conditions. Of course, the instructor thoroughly demonstrated each and every step of the process. You then practiced with the help of the instructor, and when you thought you were ready, you told the instructor that you felt you were ready to take the pole climbing test. You had a week to pass the test, and it could take as many times as you like within that week's time. If you failed by the 7th day, you were terminated. I saw very few people pass it the first day, and very few people pass it on the 7th day. Most people pass it somewhere in between the 1st and 7th day, and right around 90% of the people passed. Me? I passed on the 7th day, and it surprised the shit out of me. Regardless, it was now time to move on to ladder training. You'd think I would have been motivated, but the whole pole climbing experience just served to make me even want to quit even more. I phoned my brother to discuss my doubts with him, and he was able to convince me that the hardest part was over. I decided to persevere. Ladder training was a tad easier, but it definitely did not give me any new amazing surge of confidence. Before even touching a ladder, we learned that when parallel parking any type of Pacific vehicle, we were to place one cone in the street by the front bumper of the vehicle and one cone by the rear bumper. When parking your vehicle in a space, we were told always to back the vehicle into the space. The training involved two ladders that were affixed to the top of our vans. The combination ladder, that was the smallest of the two, is what we learned how to use first. We were taught how to take it off the van in a specific way and how to get it back on top of the van. We had to repeat the removal and replacement process several times before the instructor would move forward with the training that, when all was said and done, was easy by anyone's standards. I know most people own combination ladders in their homes for when it is needed, so I will not bother you with all the different ways the ladder could be used. It was a different story when it came to the 28-foot extension ladder. Everything that was involved in using this ladder was much harder to master. It was easy enough to understand its purpose. If for whatever reason your installation or repair involved a tall structure of some sort, this ladder had the capability of extending to the height of 28 feet. It was considerably harder to remove from the van and not much easier putting it back on. The ladder was relatively heavier, and we were taught how to extend it to its fullest height. Regardless of the height, the ladder was not designed to be able to stand on its own. It needed a building, structure, or some type of sturdy cable that could support its weight when the ladder was leaned against it. It seemed easy enough, but of course there was a specific process on how to extend the ladder to its maximum height. The first time I tried extending the ladder to its maximum height, I understood, while in the middle of extending it, why there was a process that you follow. The higher you extended the ladder, your control over its stability decreased. I dropped it more than a few times during training, and though others did so, it did not reduce the embarrassment in the slightest. For instance, picture yourself extending this very heavy ladder by using a rope and pulley mechanism that was attached to the ladder. Once you were above any given rung on the ladder, you could slowly lower the extension, and two clamps would open and catch on that rung that would hold it in place. When you reached 28 feet, however, the ladder sometime would become top-heavy, and maintaining its balance along with your own in the beginning was not an easy feat to accomplish. Most of the time, this ladder was used for tall buildings up to 3 stories high. It was very crucial to your personal safety that you stood between the ladder and the building while extending it. This way, if you felt you were losing control of the ladder, you simply needed to pull the ladder in the direction of the building, and the building would impede its fall, and you would be unharmed. You would be unharmed underneath. There are a number of people did not see the logic in standing between the ladder and the structure that you were going to lean against. The instructor then had these doubting Thomases extend the ladder from the other side. Some of them lost control of the ladder, and instead of the ladder falling toward the building, it went in the opposite direction. The students dodged any injury, but in the real world, the ladder could have landed on someone's car, or God forbid, a person. I passed the examination for ladders rather easily. I still longed for the Shell station. I don't recall if I ever mentioned that the station was about a 90 seconds driving time and 5 minutes walking time from where I lived at the time. The last thing I had to complete was basic installation and repair training. Without immersing you in a lot of detail, this training taught us how to install phones, identify trouble issues such as shorts, grounds, and opens, etc. We were also trained on the use of certain meters. Of course, this was done in a clean and sterile environment. That would not always be the case when you were out in the field. This part of the training was the easiest as far as I was concerned. It was finally all over. Although very few people failed to make it out of training successfully, I was still immensely proud of myself. Because of this, the lore of the Shell station faded ever so slightly, but then so slowly quickened its pace as I realized that the next 2 days were Saturday and Sunday, and that would only change in extremely rare instances. I would have to work on the weekend once every 4 months. This was because the responsibility was on a rotating basis among the technicians in our group. However, each weekend I would spend most of the weekend days at the station. It took time, but I eventually stopped doing that every weekend. I walked proudly into my work location the following morning, Monday, raring to go, and it was undeniable. Everyone had a surprised look on their faces except Hank. Everyone took the time to shake my hand and welcome me. I was told by some of them that I had lost them a lot of money because they had bet I would not make it out of training. I told them they had no idea of how many times they came so close to winning their bets. Everyone laughed, and I felt good about starting something new. I was now officially a service technician for Pacific Bell. It was one of my top 5 most important days of my life. However, its significance did not manifest itself until 7 years later. Hank told me the first week I would be riding with a different number of the crew each day. There are many people I met during my career at Pacific Bell, but there are 3 members of the original crew that I respect more than 98% of the other people that I have met there. You will hear about them later. In fact, this weekend I'm going to try to get their phone numbers and talk to them. Some memories last a lifetime, and I hope they are still alive so I can talk to them again.